Paul understands and believes without a doubt that Abraham was genuinely saved. However, for the sake of the discussion for the Gentiles in his purview, right here in Galatians, Paul needs to articulate that Abraham's salvation was brought about by his genuinely trusting in the promise that God revealed to him at the time. Did God tell Abraham that the Messiah to come would be named Jesus? I don't have any indication that that's the case. What we do have is that God revealed himself to Abraham in such a way that Abraham's faith laid a hold of that aspect of genuine faith that only comes by placing your faith in, from Abraham's perspective, the coming word of the Lord, or the actual word of the Lord who was having a dialogue with Abraham right then and there. Germane to the discussion for Paul's readership in Galatians is that genuine salvation is exclusive to placing your faith in Jesus. You cannot be saved generically by placing your faith generically in God, like the religious Jews were teaching or were supposing in Paul's day. We're saved because we're separated by God as the people group of God, as Israelites, and this is confirmed by our Jewish identity as Israelites. And therefore, the saying went in Paul's day, if you want to be righteous in the forensic sense, aka saved, if you want to be righteous and receive God's Spirit, then you've got to join your lot with Israel. You've got to leave your Gentile ethnicity behind. You've got to convert, become a Jew, and then God will grant salvation and Holy Spirit infilling to you. Paul said no. That is not the way you receive genuine salvation. That's not the way you're filled with the Spirit of God. Let me tell you the genuine way. And so Paul reached into his Tanakh and pulled out the example of Abraham. Let's read it. Here's what Paul has to say. Considering that the Gentiles in Galatia were heavily voting on the idea of undertaking proselyte conversion en masse, as a whole group, as a people group, right? The whole community was going to throw their lot in with this proselyte conversion program. Paul lambasts him. He just lashes out at them. Oh, foolish Galatians. David Stern's version, I think, says something like, you stupid Galatians, right? Who has bewitched you, right? Who cast a spell over you, right? This whole idea of proselyte conversion for the sake of ostensible covenant community, covenant membership and right and salvation that it brings. It was before your eyes that what? Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. He is the standard that you were taught. Listen up, he says. Let me ask you only this. Now look at my highlighted part or underlined part. Did you receive the Spirit? Pause. What Spirit? The Spirit of God? The Spirit of Christ? Or the Holy Spirit? Well, Paul doesn't differentiate right here. He simply says the Spirit. But within the context of what Paul's trying to explain to his readership, as we're going to go see, it is the genuine Spirit that comes into a believer who places his faith in Jesus. Thus, we could say it's the Spirit of Messiah, like he actually says so in Romans chapter 8. Did you receive the Spirit by works of the law, this proselyte program, or by hearing with faith, which is placing your faith in Jesus? So the contrast is not between keeping the Torah for salvation versus believing in Jesus. The contrast is between proselyte conversion, changing your ethnic status, and then becoming a Jew, and then keeping Torah, versus having genuine faith in Jesus. Which one of these things brought about the presence of the genuine Spirit of Messiah within your midst? Are you so foolish, those of you who are considering proselyte conversion, are you so foolish having begun by the genuine Spirit of Messiah? I'm filling in the blanks there. Are you so foolish that you're now being perfected by your conversion to Judaism, your perfection by your ethnicity, this perfection by the flesh? Did you suffer so many things as a believer in vain? if indeed it was in vain, right? Whether you truly are believers or not, I believe you are believers, and therefore it wasn't truly in vain. I know the Spirit's been working miracles among you. He's going to say this in the next verse here. Therefore, I know you're genuine, but this idea that you're trying to perfect what God has already perfected in you because of your faith in Jesus, you're perfecting it by your ethnicity, conversion to Judaism. That's not going to work. The Holy Spirit is already in your midst. He goes on to say in verse 5, does he who supplies the Spirit to you? Notice Paul already believes that they are genuine faith believers. So they're kind of taking a step backwards. He works miracles among you. Does God do this by your ethnicity because you've converted to Judaism? The so-called works of the law program, which was begun for Gentiles at the conversion level and completed by the continuing reliance and maintenance of Torah. That's the whole program in a nutshell. It didn't start by keeping Torah. It started by changing your ethnicity from Gentile to Jew. It was perfected in Paul's view. In the Judaisms of Paul's day view. It was perfected by your maintenance to keep Torah. So don't get that wrong there. This whole program is simply called works of the law. So it was a kind of a halakha, an ideal, just a two-step program in Paul's day. Paul disagreed with it, but originally he agreed with it. As a non-Messianic Jew, he was part and parcel. That was just kind of the standard way of thinking in Paul's day as a religious Jew. But once his eyes were opened to who Messiah was and how his righteousness was brought about as he placed his faith in Jesus and was filled with the genuine Spirit of Messiah, aka God's Spirit, aka the Holy Spirit, then Paul understood that it wasn't his ethnic status, it wasn't his flesh that brought about this infilling of the Spirit. So we're still within the context of how was Abraham justified? Well, Paul's going to get to that.